Why is it easier to talk about our poop than our paycheck?
So true. So much poop talk, no paycheck talk.
What about our sex life instead of our savings account?
Yeah, that's true.
So much easier.
The word money can not only be taboo, but a dirty secret.
Right?
Even splitting the bill at dinner is problematic and causes stress, right? And what we really make, we would never, ever talk about. We've been trained to be silent.
So true. And that silence leads to shame. And that shame, it definitely leads to stress. And that is costing us big time.
Stress costs all of us big time, 100%.
Yes. So today we're talking with leading financial expert Shannah Game, who is also a friend of Kara's.
She is. She's amazing. And our episode today is going to be about no judgment around the thing that can cause breakups, that can cause breakdowns, and that can definitely cause Bravo level drama. Money.
Money, 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 money.
Oh, gross. The drama's about to end, 'cause gross. Stop asking for a friend, taboos. Icky's what we do, just science. Yeah, it's not so weird. Your gross out journey starts right here on Oh, gross.
Hi, Shannah.
How are
Hi,
you?
Shannah.
Hi.
Nice to see you again. It's been forever.
Oh, it's been forever. It is so good to see your face again. Oh my gosh.
I know.
We are so excited to talk money with you because this is like the perfect gross subject because money is a taboo word and it's so weird.
It's
And
gross, right? Yeah.
so Shannah and I are friends through a friend named Christina, and we met years ago, and she has always approached money in a way that is just so hip, so amazing, breaks it down so easily. And as the world changes, you are up on it and how to talk to people about it. And that's what I love about you. And your background is amazing. You have over 27 million downloads, right, for your podcast.
Yeah,
is that correct?
28. I actually just sold my podcast.
Amazing.
wow.
Congratulations.
Wow.
Yeah, after 10 years. I know,
After 10
crazy.
years.
Wow.
Oh, that is amazing. Well, you just own this space. And that's why we're so honored to have you on today. When we were talking about money, I was like, stop the presses. We got to call Shannah. May is obviously mental health awareness, and so many things are tied in with your mental health and money. And we are trying to do the whole month approaching things mindfully. And how fun is it to talk about money in that space?
Yeah, and they're so interconnected. I think like that's the crazy thing that most people don't think about, right? Is that tie
Right.
behind mental health and money.
Exactly. And I just want to kind of hear a little bit more about your background and how you got started this space. And you're an author, and to talk about your books and all you've been doing. And so everyone gets a little taste of how amazing Shannah is.
I've taken a very bizarre route to get here, which probably most of us have that are entrepreneurs or creatives. I started out wanting to be a film producer and actually started one of the first student film festivals when I was in college. And I ran that for 5 years and ended up selling it to a Hollywood producer when I graduated. So I had all of these like bizarre sets of skills, and I went to get an MBA. And my dad, who'd been in the financial industry his whole career, he was bored and he was like, "Hey, would you want to join me in my small planning firm?" And I'm like, I don't know. Okay, fine. And so what I realized very quickly was that none of my MBA peers, nor any of my friends, knew anything about personal finance. And I had the luxury of, working with my dad. We were working with people who had very high net worths. And then I was working with my friends who were just kind of starting out. And I was seeing the same sort of similarities between people and between how they would react and interact with money. So I found this very interesting. So I started doing what I love, which is speaking and writing and teaching, and started my podcast. At the time, it was called Millennial Money in 2015.
I remember. Yeah.
And it just went viral. It was crazy. And I can't imagine that, that happened and that 28 million people tuned in to hear me just sort of blabber on for 10 years about money. But I started to really talk about money the way I believe it to be true. And I started to pull away from the narrative that money is just math. and really lean into, what I knew from working with people, let alone women for years, was that it's emotional and it's stories and it's beliefs and it's identity and it's power and it's all of these things kind of tied together. And that's what led me to write my book, Unraveling Your Relationship with Money. And so now I do weird combinations. I love to bake, and I have a brand called Cupcakes for the People. And so I bake and I talk about money, right? So I love
that.
I love bringing like experience to money in a way, in a storytelling way that I think it meets people where they're at.
Yes.
And it helps to break down a lot of what we're going to talk about, which is the scary, gross, bizarre feelings about money.
Right. About the word money. Even when we were talking about mindfulness this month in general, I was saying that way I found to bond with my daughter was I started making these sandwiches. And I don't know if you remember, I post like the crazy character different sandwiches, but it was something that you have to do. Like everyone has to make food, but yet it's so enjoyable and you're finding different ways. So I love this because it's approaching money in the moment, right? Like it's around us all the time. So I can't wait to dig in because I think personally, I heard a couple of years ago, a woman say that like there's energy. If you think of money more as an energy source than not just this thing we exchange, a thing, right? It changes and shifts everything. And that was the first time I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm afraid of money. And most of us are. We're afraid if we're in debt. We're afraid if we have money. We are not taught practical skills on budgeting and what that looks like or what it feels like. And when you don't talk about something, I love that we're going to dig into this. It just creates all these things. Starting out, what is the first thing you tell people about money?
Well, I think a lot of what you're talking about here, this idea that money is this like dirty secret word, right? That it has to be something that's taboo, that it's off limits. It used to be, right, that we couldn't talk about like sex, money, and politics.
Right.
Right.
And now we can talk about sex and politics. And
we still can't talk about money.
Money is still this thing. And I think being a female, like speaking from my perspective, I think there's also this narrative that it's impolite to talk about money, or that that's something that, men do and not something that women do. Still, even in 2025, I think there's still a lot of truth to that narrative. And so we've just learned to stay silent. And we've also learned that money is like the elephant in the room. And, it's created additional scarcity, right? I think everywhere around money is already scarcity. Like if you watch TV commercials that talk about anything around money, it's scarcity, right? You're not going to have enough.
Right.
You're in debt it's just the narrative is so strong. So I think it's really important to open up the sort of channels of conversation. One of my like big goals is that the four of us could be having coffee, right? And we could be having a conversation about money that is normal. Yeah. And one where we could also talk about the things that we're really scared about and have those not be taboo either to just talk about.
My friend was visiting this weekend and I was talking about how we were going to do the episode today with you. And we were talking even about with money, like when people owe you money, you're even afraid to talk about it. It's not just not having money or having money. A lot of times we put this like mental block and then you pretend it's like not there, even when someone owes you money, especially as women.
Absolutely. Right. Because it would feel like improper for us to be like, hey, where's my money?
It's like, until you stop and start talking about it, you don't think about it, but it's like so layered and ingrained.
Well, and this is the part of money that we don't learn, right? This is where my like big push about money is not just about the math piece comes in, because if you look at the sort of science studies behind money, by age 7, our money personality is basically constructed. So whatever we learned, saw, didn't hear, didn't see from our childhood is directly impacting as adults how we interact with money, but we don't learn that piece. So it's important to go back and have some sort of awareness of like, what were the messages? What were the beliefs? Was there stress? Was there not? And even, I share in my book, like my story, I grew up in a very upper class environment. I never had to worry about money. And yet there were still these narratives, like we would go on vacations and as we'd come home, my dad would be like looking at everything we spent and you're like, who bought the $12 grilled cheese? Who spent $25 on sunscreen? And so I grew to believe there's this separation, like you can't enjoy money, right? There isn't joy. Like everything needs to be a price
there's a
repercussion.
tag.
Yes. And so that carried over into my adulthood and it created a lot of anxiety and stress about money. So it's not just if you grew up in an environment where money wasn't plentiful where this can happen, right? We all have our own sort of trauma bonds around money, and they just pull through the narrative until you're an adult and you're like, wait, why am I doing this when I really actually want to do the complete opposite thing?
Or playing down. Like for me in my house, like I would always think that any moment we could be broke, right? Whether that was true or not. And I think that that's a generation, that's a whole other belief system, right? That Jenny, you've had similar, I think we've talked a little bit about that. Like when I have been successful in something, I've always wanted to play it down, right? Because why, right?
And we're scared as women too, maybe to think about those things, even though we are entrepreneurs and we're women. I am really anxious. I have anxiety around money as a business owner because I feel like I wasn't taught enough maybe about it growing up. And so it scares me. And even though I've made mistakes and learned from them along the way, I feel like I don't know enough. So it's kind of this weird relationship we have with it. And I feel like I was listening to your podcast actually about the number that we sometimes feel like we have to have in our account. And if we don't have that number, and I relate to that so much because if I don't have a certain number especially in my business account, I freak out. Oh, how am I going to provide for all these, 22 people I'm responsible for? And then how am I going to provide for my own family? And oh my goodness, the world's ending. And even though I know the money's going to come eventually,
and then you're blocking it energetically, I feel like. I see that in my own life. Like I will block it energetically because I go down a rabbit hole of paranoia instead of trusting like, okay, or you don't look at it. Right? Yes. You're like, if I look at this, then I'm going to have anxiety and I don't want to have anxiety. I mean, it's so interesting. And even our relationship with the stock market is women, like all these things, right? Like it's really, really fascinating. It's just all wrapped in anxiety with money.
It is.
There's a really good exercise that I often tell people to do. I call it financial forgiveness. And it's super simple that most people are like, this can't work. But it's very helpful. You just take out a sheet of paper, set a timer for like 10 minutes. I want you to write down like everything that you think you should have, could have, would have, done about money, every mistake, every fear. When that timer's up, I want you to get away and walk away from that paper, come back in 24 hours, take a little read over it, because with a fresh brain, you're going to actually see some patterns. And then the second piece is to get rid of it, burn it, shred it. Tear it up, whatever, right? And these sort of exercises, they obviously don't get rid of those pain points, but what they start to do is send a message to your brain and to your body that you don't have to be held, captive by these messages, right? And so much of money, what you're all sharing is it's a somatic experience, right? So it's something you're feeling, right? When you look at your bank account, maybe your palms get sweaty or your shoulders get tense, right?
Yes.
All of those, yes.
Especially nowadays.
those are little clues that there's some sort of trauma going on there, right? And so your only job is to be curious about it, not judgmental, not shameful, but just curious. Like, where does this come from? Is this true or is this not true? Do I need to believe this longer? Should I rewrite this? Can I, right? And so bringing this sense of almost like a playfulness to it helps send that message to your brain and to your body. Like, look, this doesn't have to be so hard, or it doesn't have to be as stressful as it has been in the past.
I love that. We're all going to do it.
We are.
I'm doing it today.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to do it today. I mean,
now, I do have a question though. Do you talk to people about money differently? So for example, we're entrepreneurs. So would you talk to us differently about our money that way, as opposed to being the head of the financial household per se?
Not necessarily. I think you want to believe the answer is yes, but we're really talking about the same things, right?
Okay.
We're really talking about the stories that help us and hurt us around money. We're really talking about those blocks and those beliefs. So whether we're running our own business or not, all of these components are coming into play every single time you make a decision around money. I think as an entrepreneur, because I've been one my entire career too, it can feel heavier because we carry the weight of other people or we carry the weight of our family and the income we make. So it can feel a lot heavier. But ultimately, when we're talking about something I call building healthy wealth, it's the same principles as any of us here would use, as well as somebody who's, in a corporate job or even somebody who's not working.
It's good to know.
And also, are there archetypes, like when you're 7 and you form this idea of what money is, right? Are there different archetypes that we all sort of fall into at that young age?
Yeah, there's all sorts of names. In my book, I go into kind of a bunch of different identities, but really, like, just to break it down, right? We're either savers, spenders, right? So we can fall into either of those two categories. None of them are right. None of them are wrong. Or we can also be somebody who is so obsessed with the details of it that we get lost in finding sort of the vision and the energy around money, right? And so most of us kind of bob and weave through all of those things. And so I think what's more important to focus on, when I'm talking about age 7, right, this is our money story. So this is our past. We can't change that. I like to talk about writing I call it your money hero story. So this is the vision of you, like going forward with like your cape on and your...
I want to be a Wonder Woman with money.
I know. Me too.
Yes. And so visioning, I think, is this quality that we sort of leave out when we're talking about building wealth. And it's this idea of thinking about, okay, you were talking about like that number in your bank account, right? So figuring out, okay, what is that number? Do I need that number to be there? What do I want my life to look like? Where do I want to live? What do I want to do for fun, right? And so we get so obsessed, I think, by other people's vision of money. Like we're always searching, like, how much should I have saved by age 40, right?
Right.
Well,
Right.
I mean, there's an huge asterisk mark there because it depends on so many different factors. And so I think really thinking about like, okay, what do I actually want to bring into my life? Then we take the numbers and we bring those alongside versus thinking about the numbers first, right? Which is sort of the backward approach that most people use. And then you're just never at that place that you want to be.
Because you're chasing and you're not really being present with how your relationship with the money is. That's so fascinating. And it's so true. And I also think we are harder on ourselves. Like I once had a family member say to me when I was freaking out about money, she was like, oh, but you've done so great with investments and property. Why are you so hard on yourself? Everyone has different ways that they've saved or done money. And I stopped dead in my tracks and thought that day, the whole rest of the day, I was like, I don't even think about that. I go right away to beat myself up.
Because that's how we're trained.
Mm-hmm. We're trained at
We're
when it comes to
trained
money.
to go negative first.
You're trained to go negative. We're not trained like, hey, you did great at this, but you can prove that. Or you could, you know what I mean? Learn some of this. And when you get in that space, that's it. Like then all you are is panic. And I also find the more you put out, oh, I'm broke, or this or this. Do you ever notice that you don't get opportunities? Money doesn't come? Like there's something energetically, I don't know if we're closing ourselves off or what it is that in those moments we can like get ourselves stuck.
I talk about this in my book, this idea of would you date your money, right? So if we think about this in terms of like, we're all laughing, yes, I know. If we think about it in terms of like a romantic partner, like would we still be with somebody that was always talking bad to us, that was shaming us, that was telling us always the worst things? I mean, I hope your answer is no. So, why are we allowing that to happen with money? Kara, that goes to your point that like you always go to the negative first, right? And so your first thought, we can't really control that, right? Our brain's just going to like create that first thought, but we can actually create the second, third, fourth thought, right? So we can say, okay, my first thought is that I feel like I've made all of these mistakes, or I feel like I'm not where I'm supposed to be, or I'm bad with money. Okay, great. Let's choose a second, third thought that is maybe more helpful for us, right? Like maybe I'm not where I want to be, but I'm taking steps to get there. But I have done really well with investments, or I have done this, right? And I've done this so I can do X, Y, Z, whatever that next version of it. And so that really creates a cascade because your thoughts influence your feelings influence your actions, and then your actions create these patterns and behaviors. So if we want to change how we're doing money, and change that narrative of bad with money, we have to start with like what we're thinking. It's so powerful.
Yeah. And I totally believe it. I once heard, I can't remember who the author was, but there was this anecdotal talk where she said that like that coat you really want. And if it's $5,000, you'll talk yourself into buying, the really ugly one for 300, instead of saying universe, somebody's going to gift me that 5,000. So I'm going to either earn that 5,000. I want that. And maybe you're not being stupid and buying it that day, but putting the energy out of like, I'm going to have that coat someday and, and it's going to happen. And it's so true. I was like, we sometimes buy the thing that we don't even need because we've shamed ourselves already for the thing that we really wanted, which I thought was so interesting too with the relationship with money.
Yeah. Shame is, I think, the emotion that's at the core.
You'll buy 10 of the ugly shirts if they're on sale and right because you can't afford the other one, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We make crazy decisions.
Because you're trying to fill that hole of shopping. Well, not Jenny, but me.
The non-shopper.
Jenny's not a shopper, but I am.
Jenny probably has her own version of that though, right?
Yeah.
There's got to be something.
I do, but one of the things you said that just struck me so much a few minutes ago when you said how we compare ourselves, because I know I'm so guilty of that by looking at social media and, most of it's a lie that we look at and we'll look for people our own age and see where they are and think, well, I'm not there. And so I must be failing right now with money.
Right.
I think it's so hard for us. I was having this conversation with my husband a few months ago about mortgages and things like that. And I was telling him, it's so strange because I feel like, and I don't know if you find this to be true, that women seem to have more shame and anxiety around money. And I told my husband, I said, well, I think it was like 1974 or so when we were even able to have our own mortgages without the husband co-signing it, right? So it's kind of a newer thing still for us to be trained to be smart and confident with our money.
Absolutely. And you hit like the nail on the head. Part of the sort of like scientific research behind trauma and money is that a lot of it is generational, right? And that we inherit it just like we inherit any of our other DNA. So if we look back at our grandmas and our great-grandmas and great-great-grandmas and what they've lived through when it comes to money, talk about, not being able to have access, not being able to have the same permission, not being able to be entrepreneurs and run successful businesses, right? All of that is passed down to us. So we might be having some version of interaction with money where we feel super triggered. And in reality, it actually doesn't belong to us.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It belongs to somebody in our line.
You got to talk to your inner money child.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, most of our grandparents lived through the Great Depression,
Yes,
right?
right.
I mean,
Yes,
talk
yeah.
about like a trauma moment. And so that has definitely shaped how we interact, let alone just all of the scarcity messaging that's around.
If somebody woke up today and came to you and said, all right, what is the first step I need to do, right, to not have a panic attack when I even say the word money? What would, right now, if listeners are out there saying, I don't know, I'm still scared of money, what is the first thing they can do to change that rhetoric?
I want you to ask yourself why. This sounds really ridiculous, but if you're panicked or scared, I want you to see if you can get to the foundation, see if you can peel some of the onion layers back on that, right? What is it about money that makes you scared, right? And most of us will come to some variation of maybe that we, forgot to pay a bill, or we were in a relationship and money was used as a weapon. I mean, there's something that is on the foundation, right? This is why I like to talk about money in relation to food, because we all get it, right?
Yes.
So if we're talking about my cupcakes, right, the actual cupcake structure is the foundation, right?
Right.
And so the frosting and all the good stuff is built on top of that foundation. Without it, we just have, I still love frosting, but we just have frosting, right? So thinking about your money fear from that perspective, what is underneath that? What are you really actually scared about? And once you have that information, then you can start going from there, right? Is this true? Is this not? Does this really apply to where I am today, right? Are there ways I could start taking some little tiny micro steps to change this version, right? It's about getting to that foundation and then seeing, okay, how do I build back up from that spot. So that doesn't have to be the reality. And most people want to take like giant sweeping steps, and that doesn't work, right?
No.
I'm talking
That's
little,
like
if
the cleanse to lose the weight, and then you
Yes.
do, and then you right.
if
you go
you're
back
afraid to look at your bank account,
yeah.
log on and set a timer for 10 seconds or 5 seconds. When the timer goes off, walk away. You're done. Like you've done your check mark for the day. Next time when you go back, maybe it's 10 seconds, right? You're building up little bits of confidence in yourself that you can be trusted around money, and that old story or narrative doesn't have to be true.
I love that, because the world we live in, we are also in this pattern of disconnection with our money, because now it's on our phones. You know, you can Apple Pay, you can transaction, a lot of automatic things, right? That are just getting charged that you signed up for, or whatever it might be. All these things that just, we're not present. We're completely like removed from the process of the exchange. And that becomes really easy to live in that denial, and just to like look at your bank account for 10 seconds and, you know, check all those things. Because I feel like the generation before us, that was just part of what they did, where they, you know, sit down and they check every transaction and they know what happens. And that is not something that we're taught, right?
Yeah,
Because we're
that's
more
so true.
afraid
To
of
the
it.
cent. Our grandparents and even the baby boomers, our parents, right? They
Our
would
parents, you know.
bounce those checkbooks to the cent.
And
Well, that's me though. I mean, I do that all the time because I have such a fear. You know, I'm sure everyone's had something stolen out of their bank accounts or credit cards or things like that. I am so fearful about that I have to know what is in my accounts down to the penny. I am a person that will do the checkbook and all of that. But I'd like to know, how do we break a cycle? For example, for me, you know, I've gone through where things are great and then all of a sudden something happens and you may have to get brakes in your car, or the refrigerator dies or whatever. So it's kind of like you have this up and down cycle. Is there a way to break that cycle, or is there a way to mentally kind of prepare yourself for something like that?
Well, I think always the mental preparation, because this is life, right?
Right.
But also there are a couple of things you can do. One is something I suggest called a money date. And so what I do is I calendar every Sunday, 15 minutes. And this is my time to look at money, do money, right? And I don't have any requirement to look at it out of this time period. And what's important is that you go somewhere or do something you enjoy. Go to a park, go to your favorite restaurant, have a cocktail, like make it an experience. And what you're doing is you're looking at the past week, what you spent, where it went. Are there any changes you want to proactively make? And then you're looking at the week forward. Is there anything I need to prep for? Do I need to move money? Is there anything going on? And then the third thing you're doing is just looking at your goals. Like, where am I? Do I need to set new goals? Do I need to give myself a little reward? Have I hit a milestone? Simple, simple, simple. Timer's up, we walk away, right? But what this does is it starts to train you that you're the conductor of your money, and that you have these blocks of time when you go in and you access money, right? And you figure out what's going on, and you create it in an experience in a way that doesn't feel scary.
I love that you're taking it out of the house and you're saying go on a date
out of the
with
house,
yourself.
Okay.
out of the house.
I love that.
And
Out
I
of the
love
house.
that it's for people who are more like me, more scared. It's only 15 minutes. And people like Molly, who might be spending more than 15 minutes.
Yes.
We're not going to go the other way either. And I
Yes.
love that. It's like perfect.
And then the second piece, you know, for all these kind of unexpected things, I'm somebody who hates the word budget. I like to talk about a spending plan, which is more of like a roadmap of where my money's going. And there's certain banks that let you do this, but setting up separate high yield savings accounts and labeling them things like, you know, my OSHIT fund, or my, you know, want to go to drinks with girlfriends fund, or, you know, I've worked with a couple of people who have ADHD. And they have this thing where sometimes they just get like frantic, have to go spend money. So we set up a separate account called my frantic spending account. And they put money in there
It's like
every
my
month.
manic shopping. I love that.
Manic shopping, right? So create a structure for yourself where you feel like money is flowing to different areas that are going to give you some sense of like, okay, when all my tires, you know, fall off my car and I've got to spend $1,000, like I actually have that account with money saved or a portion that I go into, right? And so you're telling yourself, like, I don't have to freak out about this. This is my account where I've said I can spend money on without guilt or shame. Or, this is my account that I can go every week to the yoga class I want to go to, or whatever, right? We're starting to create these rules around money that give you flexibility, that make you feel like you're covered, but also, retell the story to yourself that money is there for you to access it without guilt or shame.
I like that because it feels like sometimes that money is just one giant block. And so when you're saying all of these different accounts, like to me, that makes a lot of sense. And it actually kind of takes my anxiety down a little bit about it.
Same.
Because otherwise I'm looking at money as just one giant block of something.
Yes. Put it in buckets. And if your bank allows it, there are a few banks that do this where you can name the title of that account, whatever you want. And so I always tell people, like, name it something that feels really specific to you. So when you look at it visually, your brain's going to go, oh, there's my Mykonos fund or whatever. Like, look at it growing,
There's my grilled cheese fund.
Yes.
And what I like about this too, it's such an OG approach, which is so good for our brains. Because like I was thinking like, so I started like doing Rocket Money because I was like, okay, I'm going to get these alerts. It's going to help me. And then sometimes like you'll get an alert on your phone and it's like, you've spent this astronaut woman. I'm like, what did I do? And I was like, my mortgage it's your mortgage. Like it's the same thing every month, but I haven't opened it up yet. Right. So I'm like yelling to Brian, I got this weird alert. What's going on with our bank? And then I read it and it's because that, it can cause more panic. Some of these things that are like making our lives easier are not. They're causing us more anxiety. And that in what your approach, it just brings us back to like, we're naming the account, we're managing the money, we're in control. Because again, going back to what you said, like when Rocket Money is the person that's the conductor. You've got an app conducting your money, right? Like telling you what you're spending instead of you being in charge. And not that you can't use these tools, but I'm just saying it's funny. I was thinking like, oh my gosh, that's like, I get those panic attacks over the alerts.
And you have full permission to turn those alerts off.
Right.
And check in on it once a week or every 3 days or something where you've set aside that time slot. Right. So it's not coming up in your day and then causing that sort of panic spiral all day long.
Right. Because anything gets text to us, our brain just automatically like fires off irrationally.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There's no contextualization to it. So I love that. Yeah. I'm at fault like that. I do not shut the alerts off because I think I'm going to miss something big and then it does this great panic.
You're so not alone. I mean, the beauty of this conversation is I haven't released them yet, but they're coming soon. I started filming a series for our social media called Money Out Loud, where I go out in public and I ask strangers 5 money questions and I give them $5 to honor their money story. And it's so fascinating to hear how similar we all are. And you'll hear somebody say something, you're like, oh my gosh, I feel the same way. But because we don't talk about money, it stays silent. And, that's what leads to the overthinking. That's what leads to the anxiety. Because you think, I am the only one who has ever had this happen. And you absolutely aren't.
And by the time you do talk about it, it feels like so overwhelming then, right? Or if you do find someone that it's gotten so much bigger than it needed to be, if you were talking about it. When it comes to education and money, can we touch on that a little bit? Like, why do you think we're not taught some of these basic things in school? I mean, it seems like it's
getting
so
better. I believe there are 27 states now that mandate some level of personal finance.
Oh, that's huge.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. But it's still fairly rudimentary. I taught at a university in Los Angeles for 10 years, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to use a textbook. I'm going to use podcasts and blogs, and I want them to have like the real version of money. And so, that's still, I think, lacking a bit. I think that because money touches all aspects of our lives and because most of our parents and their parents never learned about money, there's something bizarre about us really breaking that taboo and saying like, no, we're making this a priority, right? There are other countries that are far ahead of us on teaching personal finance, probably not surprising, but I think there is a wave and a shift to it becoming part of the conversation, but it's still so far behind. And then I think there's this added layer of reality that people not knowing about personal finance, right? It keeps a lot of companies in business.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And think about that. Yeah.
Credit card companies, mortgage companies, student loans, personal loans. So there's a big business component underneath a lot of us
keeping
not
us
knowing.
in the dark.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Well, even credit cards. I mean, think about it. So
Yeah.
many people don't understand how they work. And when I say that, what is fluctuating, right? And why your bill could be more expensive one month to another. The basic usage of a credit card is not taught to us. And so many people don't even understand it,
The interest rates.
Absolutely.
which is like mind blowing. They don't understand the interest rates. They don't understand the APR moving. They don't understand
Right.
any of that. They don't know what it's tied to. We learned certain things, and I took a basic finance class in college, but we didn't learn like the basic things. Like when you go apply for a credit card, right? Here's what you need to look for, and here's what could change. And here's why it could change, because it's tied to XYZ. It's fascinating to me.
But a lot of the youngsters, they don't even know what the credit bureaus are. To add on to what you were saying, Kara, some of our younger employees or, just some of our friends' kids, they've asked, well, how do I find out what my score is and where do I go? They don't even know the names of the credit bureaus sometimes I've seen.
Absolutely. Let alone, even a step up from that, things like, hey, you can actually call and negotiate a lower interest rate. And hey, you can call and get your annual fee waived. And all of these sort of nuances that are super important about money too, that aren't taught on top of that, which are the real practical uses of things.
And that goes back to not looking at it. So if I'm just going to pay my bill and I'm not going to look at it and I'm too afraid, I'm not going to call the credit card company, right? And I'm not going to say, hey, is there any way to get a better rate? Hey, is there any deals? Hey, can we waive X, Y, Z? And when you do call, I know this has been me personally, I've had them say to me, you've had this card and everything you're getting on it and you're getting a fee right now, like the same card's free. Right. That can happen if you've had a credit card for so long, especially these mileage point ones. Like if you don't know and you don't ask, of course, they're going to continue to take your money, which I think is, so true too. It's like, do you have a schedule? That's my next question to keep in mind, because I love your 15 minutes of looking at your bank account once a week and kind of balancing everything. What about our subscriptions, our credit cards, all those kind of things? Because that can get overwhelming. You could be in a rabbit hole for hours and curled up in a bed, right? Once you look at how much, you forgot that you had Hulu being charged twice a month or whatever it might be, and your credit cards, like you're saying. Do you have a recommendation for people to dip their toe in the water there with things like that?
Well, the money date time each week is, or whatever cadence you choose, is a great time for the subscriptions, right? Because you're looking at the past week and the future week. And so the past week you're saying okay, am I double charged for anything? Like I had 3 subscriptions to QuickBooks. I'm like, what in the world? How did this happen? But I would have never noticed it had I not seen one week, 3 charges come out, right?
Right.
And so use that time to be more like an investigator, if you will, right?
Yeah.
In your money and go, okay, wait, something weird is here. Let me figure this out. The credit cards and things like that, I do this 2 times a year. So every January, my birthday's in July, so I use that as a trigger too in July. I sit down and I look over my credit card interest rates. I call the companies to see if there's anything better I can move to, any better interest rate. But also I call my cell phone company, my internet company, and I call my car insurance company. Those are 3 things where we just tend to pay and keep paying. And we don't realize there's always new products coming out. So twice a year when I call my internet or my cell phone company, almost every time I end up saving money. I move to a new plan that just came out. I still have the same perks, but I usually end up saving, $20 or $30 a month.
Wow.
So these things start to add up over time, but this is all doing things like this. And again, it doesn't have to take you a long time, half hour, right? If that, right? Set a time frame for yourself. But they start again to put you back in the power position around money.
And it's scheduled, so the anxiety is reduced. I know this is the twice a year when I'm going to have to take a look at this, and it's planned. And so you're not sitting in the panic all year, like, I'm not going to look, or that wake up where you're like, oh my gosh, what if my credit card's been overcharging me? You know, I love the scheduling of it because it makes it so much more tangible and manageable. It's like cleaning your house at springtime, you know, when you, right?
Yeah.
It's scheduling that.
And
going
do
through
the
your
same
closets.
thing. Get a cocktail, go somewhere fun,
Oh, yeah.
set the scene.
Yeah, I love that. Set the scene and get ready to start arguing with. No, but I love it. Like, it's perfect. Like, you know, I also think doing it outside of your home or being even outside at your home, it makes a huge difference. You know, what your mentality is, because there's so much stress in our home and reminders of money stress in our home. And I love that you keep suggesting take yourself out of that position and tackle these things, but tackle them in a place where you feel zen or excited.
Absolutely. Yeah. It totally changes the story. It changes how you feel about it. And I think, you know, the last thing I would add on to this kind of scheduling piece is build in a reward for yourself. Right.
Yes,
so if
I love rewards.
somebody
rewards are great.
is dealing with like paying off debt, right? Set little mile markers for yourself. Like maybe it's every $1,000 you pay off or every 500 or 100, whatever it is. Give yourself some sort of small little reward. What it's going to do is it kind of gamifies the process, but you stay more motivated to the process. And you can apply that to anything. Every time you do a money date, give yourself a little like gold star and go get a scoop of ice cream. I don't know, something, right? It's going to keep you motivated to keep coming back and doing the same process.
I love that because then you're excited. You're in a little competition with yourself, number one, right? But I also love that you're little by little chipping away the negative relationship, right? Slowly but surely, the negative relationship that you have with money. You're slowly changing your own rhetoric by just like saying, hey, I'm going to reward myself for this.
Yeah, and you're changing how you feel. And I think that's, you know, ultimately what we all want, right? We want a different feeling. And so all of these little bits and pieces, they may sound super simple, but they all go into the piece of the pie to helping us feel less anxious, less stressed. There's still always going to be stress. This is money. It's a big piece of our lives. It's the longest relationship we'll have outside of ourselves.
Right.
But we can also control how stressed out we get or how anxious we get. Like what's that level on the thermometer, right? We can keep it relatively low by doing some of these things.
Well, I keep thinking about what example I'm leading for my children. Because my kids are 11 and 6, just turned 6. It's interesting because I'm like, well, even just the energy around how to break those patterns, right? So that they aren't having to go back and be like, well, at 7, my mom really shit the bed on how she taught me about money. And
But what is a good age to start talking to kids about money?
That's
What's
what I
a
was
good
going to
age?
say. Yeah.
Super early.
Yeah.
Okay.
Having conversations, bringing them into the decision process, you know, hey guys, we've got $50 this week for our eating out budget. Like, let's all decide how we want to spend it and where we want to spend it.
Oh, that's fun.
Okay.
Different things like that. Bring them into, even if you have a moment of feeling stressed, like explaining to them, depending on what age they are, how you do the language, right? But inviting them into the story around money and teaching them that it is emotional and that's okay is really important piece. But I think also putting them in the decision-making role with you on certain decisions, vacations, what we're eating, what we're doing with extra money, you know, how we're spending it this weekend, all of those things are helping them learn healthy, like decision-making around money, but also, you know, consequences of choice, right? We can do this, but maybe not that, or whatever it might be. And for them, it's going to help them learn how to interact with money in, I think, a stronger way with a better foundation kind of moving forward.
I like that.
Well, and also the anxiety, right? They're not going to be anxious, and it's not going to be, because kids pick up on anxiety and it gets so strong, especially nowadays with all the things they're bombarded with, right? And I love that you're taking the anxiety out because they want to feel some sort of control too, right? When it comes to money. And so I think that's genius to just say, hey guys, we have this for our budget.
Right.
And this is how we're going to do it. Because then that takes that fear away. Well, we don't have enough money to do that.
Right.
That's a negative connotation. We don't have that. So then they have fear of like, oh no, we don't have that. What's that going to mean? Instead of like, we have this. What should we do with it? I love that. It just flips the script, you know, in a way that.
I had a client who she was just so mad because she was divorced, and like when her kids would come to her house, she'd end up making something for dinner and they're like, I don't want that. And so then she'd be like, all right, well, let's go out to eat, and she'd end up spending all of this money that she didn't really have to be spending on food. And so she introduced the money date weekly concept with her kids. So when they got to her house, whatever day of the week, they would sit down and have like a 5-minute family money date. And she would say, okay, we've got, $75 this week. We can either go to the grocery store and meal plan, or we can figure out how to stretch the $75 to buy dinners out. But once that money's up, like this is our pot, we've got to use. And they became super competitive. They actually started creating little menus, and one would cook one night and one would cook the other night. And so it started to be a whole different story around this narrative. And then they knew when they came to mom's house, like the first thing they were going to do was we were going to have a money date. Right.
Yeah.
And it was going to be fun. And so it just changed the vocabulary from the very beginning for them.
I love that you said it was only 5 minutes too. That's huge.
Yeah. Bill can pay attention.
Not a lot of time. Let's just go.
But that's digestible for children, right? That's like, okay, we're going to take the first 5 minutes just to do this. And then it's simple, but yet so powerful. And they're involved in the process. And now they're not afraid. I think that's so smart. And I think that we are told, how do I put that? I feel like money's a secret, right? It's like that thing you whisper about, right? Like, oh, she has money or she's broke. It's a whole, it's a secret. And with kids, secrets eat them alive. We know this. We've seen all the studies. We know that it is a known fact that when we don't talk about things with our children, right? When something's a secret, it is really problematic later on. And so I love that money's not a secret in the house anymore.
Absolutely.
It's
and you're changing it for them and you're changing it for yourself.
Right. Right. It's exactly. You're changing it for both of them. And it's so simple, Here's the thing too, though, because we had a whole episode on one of our episodes about how you should always have cash on hand, and nobody does in emergencies.
My husband does all the
you're,
time.
except for Molly's husband, who always has
all
cash.
the time.
We're coming to Molly's house.
I know. My dad too. I'm always like, I don't have to panic ever. My dad always has cash on him, and he's always like, why don't you guys have cash on you? But it's true. Like in an emergency, if everything digitally, just broke down, I think part of it's laziness. And I'm curious what you think, Shannah. I think part of it is, we've gotten used to this society where we don't have to have cash, but also it just reinforces we don't have to touch the money. Right? We don't have to have money on us. It means that I can put money off in this dark corner, right, even farther, and have this bad relationship with it by not having cash at hand.
Yeah, and the touching it is a huge thing. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and we had the hurricane come through here and basically destroy our town. And we had no electricity for 15 days. Which means no ATMs, which means no cash, which means you couldn't use credit cards. And so between my husband and I'm a money expert, we had $7 in change. And we had to make that work. We had to get water. We had to put a little gas in the car. And I was like, okay, all right, I got the message.
Wow.
So we have cash. Not a lot, but enough put away. But there's something very tactile about interacting with cash. So I even tell people if you do the money date thing, you're going to notice that all of us have a category or two where we tend to overspend.
Or 3 or 4. No.
Yeah, eating out or shopping, right?
Right.
One way to change this is to set a boundary for yourself. Take out cash for a month or two. And so anytime you're going out to eat, you're using cash from that cash pile and you're having to physically pay for it, right? This isn't a forever thing. This is just a thing to show your brain and body like, oh, this is how much I'm spending and how often I'm having to reach into that envelope to pay for something that goes in the eating out category, right? And so after doing that for like 30 days or so, then you can start to say, okay, I have a feel for what feels more comfortable or how fast I'm running out of that money. And then you have a decision moment, like, am I okay with that or do I want to change that? So I think there's something great. That family that does the money date of eating out, they use cash.
I was going to say that probably the kids, that's important too. That's the second piece of it. Our children are growing up in a transactional world that we're not seeing the physical cash either. And I was just thinking, this is going to help my kids too, right? To see, here's the money we have, they're touching the money. They're going to understand when it's not there, there's no money in that can because there's no money in that can right now. Right?
Yeah. I mean,
right?
that's a huge emotional connection piece that the younger generations are just going to miss out, 100% on because of technology. And so it does lead to overspending. It does lead to, I think, more trauma, more stress, more anxiety, which is what all of the studies are showing, is that it's only getting worse. It's not getting better. And it really is because we're not physically touching it or seeing it. And it's further creating this narrative that it is a scary thing.
Yeah. Or something you have no relationship with. I mean, when we were little, you saw commercials or you looked in the catalog and you wanted to get the toy, of course. But we had to go into the store and get the toy. And I remember my dad would have us pick up sticks for a penny, and you had to pick up a lot of sticks if you wanted to get right? That little mini gumball machine or whatever it was. But now these kids, I mean, even if you have blocked everything like we have, but at some point they're seeing these commercials for games or for whatever it might be. And it's a touch or a click, right?
Right.
In order to purchase that.
Yeah. Another recommendation is I had a family take off the auto pay on Amazon, which is a pain in the butt. I know. But what happened was they would keep a notepad by the computer, and every time they would buy something, they would write it on the notepad. So visually they could see.
This is great. I love this.
How much
My
they were
husband's gonna love
spending.
that.
But every time, the kids wanted to purchase something, they had to go in, the parents obviously, and manually put in the credit card, which is completely a pain. But what it does is it creates a pause between what you want to buy and what you can instantly push the button.
Yeah,
It
and
gives you that
yes.
moment to just think like, do we want this? Do we not?
Even just writing it on a pad that everyone can see of the
Transparency.
Yeah, right? The transparency of what you are purchasing on Amazon is genius. Right? Because it's also a dirty little secret, even though everyone sees it.
is.
Right?
It is. I need to do that.
It's like all the boxes that have shown up at the front door, and you're like, oh, wait. And,
Who
you look at
ordered
each
that?
other. Yeah, who ordered
I
that?
didn't order that.
Exactly. That is genius. Even if you are too lazy to take off the auto pay, it's still smart to have that list. Right? Because then we're having a pause in between our transactions.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's the pause that's going to help you a lot especially with categories that are, our trigger categories or the places where we overspend, just creating a moment just for your brain to think. So I created something called the 24-hour spending pause. So I allow myself to put everything in the cart, everything I want, complete dopamine hit. I'm adding stuff. Right, left, center.
I like this part.
Carrie just got really excited about that.
Come back in 24 hours and then I audit. Okay, what do I actually really need from this?
That is, that is really smart.
I end up getting rid of probably like 90 to 95% of the cart because I'm like, why did I put that in the cart? I don't need that.
Groceries too. I mean, with the Instacart, evolution and delivery, like that can start to happen. It becomes like it's gamified for us. That dopamine starts kicking in, and next thing you know, you're like, oh wait, yeah, I need to have 3 of those things that I don't even need. I do that with groceries. Like I'll dump everything in the cart and then I'll wait until the next day and I go in and then I laugh. Because I'm like, why? What commercial or what little thing did I see that I thought I was going to have time to make that this week? Right? I just want you to know it's the whole reason I started making bread again, which is fun. But like I still have the sourdough starter sitting. Great idea, like Brian said. But a great idea when? Was that going to happen that week? No. All of a sudden I was going to be starting my sourdough when I don't even time to breathe, let alone, it's funny.
But that's such a great example of the emotional tie to money.
Yes.
Right? And so sometimes it's fun to think about, what was I feeling or thinking when I put that in the cart,
I know what I was feeling. I saw a bunch of people posting about their sourdough and they're cooking their kids, and I felt guilty. Like, why am I not? Why don't I have my own sourdough starter? And I must have seen in a month, like 5 different people I knew had done it because I was trying to. And for some reason in my head, I was like, I need to be doing this if I'm a good parent.
Every good parent needs a sourdough starter.
Every good parent needs to buy a sourdough starter kit, which again, super fun to do, but maybe I financially it would be smart to pick it when you're going to actually use it, right? Because we do that too. Sometimes we buy things because of this impulsiveness and this not being like a healthy relationship where we slow down and like take a moment and be mindful. We buy things that not necessarily are bad because they might be great for July, but we're in November, right? Or they might be something that we want to work towards and it would be really fun. And actually there'll be more value to it when the family knows, guess what? We can have this tin can and when it hits this, we're going to buy our sourdough starter and we're going to make it together. Much different than Amazon has delivered all these things I don't need. Although I will tell you guys, the egg poacher I got, genius. Did change my life. My kids love it. I use it all the time. Sourdough starter kit is not being used, but the egg poacher is.
That's great.
So if you were to give us, because I know we have to wrap up here on this episode, and we guys, listeners, we have the glory of having Shannah for 2 episodes. So we're going to have a second episode that will drop later as well. But for this episode, and just touching on our relationship with money and the mind, when we think about it, being mindful with money, what would be the 5 things you want all our listeners to know that's kind of like your top tips?
I would say, we've talked about all these, but to summarize, number 1 is that, again, we were raised to treat money like a secret, right? And so just talking about it, I think really helps take down that story and that narrative. 2 is that I think the silence really is what leads into the anxiety and the shame and all of those emotions around it. So really thinking about what is true and what isn't true about money. And then the 3rd, I don't want people to confuse this idea of not knowing about money and being bad with money. Those are 2 separate things. You're not bad with money because you don't know how to invest. And so really separating those things and the things where you identify, I don't know, like go research. There's so many, ChatGPT, anything. There's so many resources to help you, let alone live people like myself. Number 4, I think, we're wired to protect ourselves. And so we're going to do the things that feel comfortable, even if they're not the quote unquote right things around money. So really thinking about, how can I build in pause? How can I have a money day? Like, how can I take back the narrative is really important. The 5th one is just encapsulating this, that talking about money and taking some of these actions, even doing these tiny little exercises, it starts to take back the power. So you can change things from fear to, I'm just going to be curious, or I'm going to bring a little joy. I'm going to give myself rewards, right? You're just starting to just subtly rework the narrative around money. And that's going to ripple out so much further than you can even imagine.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And where can our listeners get your book and listen to your podcast? So tell us.
You can find my book, Unraveling Your Relationship with Money, absolutely everywhere books are sold. And you can head to my website, everyone'stalkingmoney.com, to find out everything that I'm up to.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shannah. We're so excited to talk to you again soon.
Yes,
thank you for, I already feel better about money. I don't know about you girls, but I feel like a little weight was lifted in this conversation.
Definitely.
I do too. I feel less anxiety for sure.
Good. That was so informative and simple. And I feel like right away, don't you feel like you have a totally different feeling about the word money? It doesn't feel like as icky.
I feel a little more zen about
Zen around the word, now. Saying money out now. Well, I'm so excited to say that we're not done with Shannah yet.
Yay! We need Shannah.
I love
her. She is going to come back. We're going to do a part 2 discussion with her because she is going to talk to us all about your relationship with money, which is even more advanced than what we started talking about today.
Interesting. Yes.
Your relationship with money and her theory that everyone actually is in a relationship with money, whether they like it or not. And sometimes you're breaking up a lot.
We are. That's for sure.
And sometimes your money might cheat on you.
Yes.
This episode was all about having mindful moments with your money. Yes, money can even be broken down to moments in our relationship with it. Moments count when it comes to even money. If you want to learn more fun tips and tricks on how to be mindful and just calm the everyday chaos, please follow us at Oh Gross, wherever you get your podcast. And remember, we drop new episodes every Wednesday.
Are you looking for confidence with your cash? Well, head to ogross.com for more simple money tips.
Want more ways to sneak mindfulness into your day? Follow at It's Oh Gross so that you can get bite-sized tips, relatable moments, and a little more humor to help you stay present in the everyday chaos of life.
Oh, gross. That drama's about to end, 'cause gross. Stop asking for a friend, taboos. Icky's what we do. Psoriasis, podiatrist, and pinworms too. It's so gross. No need for strife because gross. Lice is part of life, it's just science. Yeah, it's not so weird. We got the facts, nothing to fear. Oh, gross. It's just science, no, it's not weird. It's just science, nothing to fear. It's just science, so wipe those tears. It's boogers and